Hello everyone, this is Rig. Welcome to an episode on the Egyptian civilization. In this video, we are going to go through the characteristics of Egyptian civilization. So this is going to be very interesting, and please carry a notebook with you so that you can note down the important points. Also, the last part of this video contains a few questions and their answers which will help you in your exams, and it will also help you to understand this chapter in a better way. Now, this video is tailored according to the ICSE syllabus of class 8. However, anyone interested in the topic, especially the competitive exam aspirants, can go through this video. So, beginning with the characteristics of Egyptian civilization. Introduction. Where is Egypt located? Egypt is located in the eastern part of the Sahara Desert in North Africa. So you can see in the map itself, the location is in the eastern part of Sahara Desert, and it is in the northern part of African continent. The Egyptian civilization developed in the valley of river Nile. So all the ancient civilizations were formed around the banks of important rivers. Like in Mesopotamia, we have seen Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In Indus Valley civilization, we will see that the civilization have been formed around the tributaries of Indus River. Similarly, in Egyptian civilization, it developed around the valley of river Nile, and Nile River is one of the longest river in the world. Nile River was the central to the whole civilization. So the whole civilization developed only because of the presence of river Nile. It was a constant and major factor in its development. We can understand this, that water is the foremost substance needed for human existence. Hence, that source of life was from the river Nile. The civilization developed in the valley of river Nile. The Nile played an important role in the growth and development of Egyptian civilization. Now, how is Egypt the gift of Nile? How did the Nile River contribute to the growth of Egyptian civilization? Gift of Nile. The Greek historian Herodotus has rightly called Egypt the gift of Nile. So, Greek historian Herodotus, when he visited Egypt or when he heard of Egypt, he understood that all these things which the Egyptians have done were only possible because of the presence of river Nile. Hence, he gave this name to Egyptian civilization, that is, the gift of the Nile. The Nile River overflowed its banks every year without fail and transformed the entire valley into fertile land. So sometimes during the year it happened, the frequency was each year. So each year the Nile River flooded, and with flood it also brought a lot of sedimental depositions called silt. Thus fertile land was formed around its banks. The soil accumulated made it possible to carry out farming and settle along the banks around 5000 BC. So the soil provided resources for agriculture, and that is how people could settle around the river Nile in 5000 BC. The waters of river Nile served as a source of irrigation through canals, dams, dikes, and reservoirs. So irrigation facilities were constructed around river Nile with the help of engineering technologies and creative features like digging canals, making dams, dikes, which means walls to control the flow of water, and also reservoirs for storing water. The river Nile served as a national highway and helped in trade with neighboring countries. Now, water transport is the cheapest form of transport, and river Nile acted as a national highway for trading with neighboring countries. The valley of the Nile was a narrow strip of fertile land stretching along the banks of Nile. So this valley of river Nile was very narrow, and narrow because it happened, the agriculture and settlements happened only on the banks of river Nile. So however the river Nile flowed, in that same way settlements and agricultural fields were developed. It was 1,200 kilometers long. The rest of Egypt was a desert of sand and stone. So, except this part of River Nile, everything in Egypt is only desert. And where what can you find in desert? Sand and stone. The desert acted as a natural barrier and had rich mineral deposits including metals. So desert was a natural barrier, means people in order to attack Egypt had to go over the had to cross the desert, Sahara desert, which was very difficult. So it was a natural barrier, and also it had rich mineral deposits including different varieties of metals. Egyptians used the metals and stones to quarry limestone and granite into statues, temples, and pyramids. So these stones and metals were quarried out, means were dug out, and limestone quarries are famous in this area, and also granite. So these things were used to make statues, temples, and pyramids. Sources and kingdoms. What are the sources of information for the Egyptian civilization? The history of Egypt has been reconstructed on the basis of archaeological excavations, inscriptions, and official documents. So, the whole history of Egypt is based on the sources like excavations, which is the most important source because it is real source, it cannot be exaggerated. Inscriptions are also a part of archaeological excavations itself, because inscriptions are mainly royal in nature, and they were made by some kings. And also we have official documents. Official documents means daily administrative functions of the government were written down, and those documents act as a source of informations. The Egyptian history has been divided into periods known as kingdoms. So reign of different dynasties are kingdoms. These periods represented stability in the Egyptian civilization. So all these periods represented how stable Egyptian civilization was. They were separated by periods of instability called the intermediate period. So uh, all these kingdoms were changed one after another. So in between the two kingdoms there used to be intermediate periods, and these intermediate periods were unstable in nature. From the earliest times, Egypt was divided into two parts, Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. So, the landscape of Egyptian civilization has been divided into Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. The civilization began around 3100 BC with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. So, around 3100 BC, both Upper and Lower Egypt were unified under one political administration. The first king was Menes or Narmer. So the name of first king is Menes, who is also referred to as Narmer. In ancient Egypt, the king was called Pharaoh. So Pharaoh or Pharaoh, however you would like to pronounce it, is the name or the title given to the king of Egypt. Timeline. So how many dynasties were there and for how many years they ruled? First comes the early dynastic period. The early dynastic period lasted from 3100 BC to 2686 BC. Then came the Old Kingdom. Old Kingdom lasted from 2686 BC to 2181 BC. So almost about 500 years was the period for the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom lasted from 2050 BC to 600 or 1650 BC. So this was again for approximately 400 years. The New Kingdom lasted from 1550 BC to 1069 BC. So this was again a period of 500 years approximately. Then there was decline in the Egyptian civilization. After the end of New Kingdom, the Egyptian civilization started to decline. So after the end of New Kingdom, the civilization started to collapse. The period saw invasions by Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, and finally by Alexander the Great. So these are the people. Babylonians, Assyrians are from the Mesopotamian civilization. Persians ruled in Central Asia, and the Alexander came from Macedonia in Greece and finally conquered the Egyptian civilization. The rule of pharaohs ended around 30 BC with the death of Queen Cleopatra. Cleopatra committed suicide at the time of Roman invasion. Cleopatra had a very strategical relationship with the Roman Empire, but after all, she failed in her missions and was forced to commit suicide. Egypt then became a province of the mighty Roman Empire. So then Egypt became the province of Roman Empire. It became a part of Roman Empire. Now we will go through the characteristics of Egyptian civilization, beginning with town planning. Urban planning. Urban planning in ancient Egypt is a matter of continuous debate. Now, what is the debate? Many people consider the fact that Egyptian towns were very much planned, but some cities show that there was very much lack of planning. Cities like Memphis and Thebes grew organically, others were planned near the Nile. So these two cities did not have any plan as such. They grew in their own way organically. However, other cities were built near River Nile and they were very much planned. Cities were divided into upper and lower regions. So cities which were there on in the northern part where the upper which were there in the southern part were the upper Egyptian cities, and which were there in the northern part were lower Egyptian cities, because the river Nile flowed from south to north. Remember this, river Nile flowed from south to north. Hence, the northern part was lower. Dwelling houses. Most dwelling houses were made from mud mixed with straw and shaped using molds. So they were like big bricks, and however, bricks are very small in sizes, but these mud blocks are like big boxes of mud. And how were they made? They were made using molds, and the material was mud mixed with straw to give more durability. Construction style. Mud was dried in the sun until hard. Simpler houses had thin walls, large houses had thicker walls. So this simpler houses had walls of 1 block thick. However, expensive houses or houses of rich people, large houses, they had walls of 2 or 3 block thick. Larger houses and palaces had compound walls and varied layouts. So they had walls for protection. Who? The larger houses, which were mainly for the wealthy people. Houses were based on family size and wealth located in urban or rural areas. So all the houses were mainly based on family size and how much wealthy a person is. And they were located in both rural and urban areas. Most houses featured 3 to 4 rooms, included a central courtyard and a back patio. So there was a central courtyard, rooms were around the courtyard, and also there was a space in the back. Public buildings were there. Public buildings were mainly temples. They had high walls, they had symmetrical layout, and also huge gateways. Most of the public buildings are not found anymore. They have disappeared. They may have been broken down by the invaders. Now we will go through the family life. How was the family in Egyptian civilization? The ancient Egyptians lived in close knit groups and joint families. So the Egyptian people lived in very close attached manner with each other, so it is called close knit groups. And joint families means the relatives and everyone used to live in a single house. The eldest male, the father, was the head of the family. This was a patriarchal society, so the eldest male will be the head of the family. Women were respected, treated equally, and had property rights. So women were very much respected. They were given equal treatment, almost equal treatment to men, and they could also inherit property. Boys were sent to schools while girls took care of the home. So boys were mainly given practical education like maths, science, accounts, trade, commerce, all these things, while girls were given training in household works. Wealthy families lived lives of luxury and pleasure. So if you have money, you will live lives of luxury and you will have lots of pleasure time. Family outings included boating, hunting, fishing, swimming, and sailing. So, family outing means entertainment. Entertainments were based on activities like boating, hunting, fishing, swimming, and also sailing. A great deal of emphasis was placed on family life and children. So, children were considered very important and they were handled with care. How was the food of the Egyptians? What were the dietary practices? So, the staple food of the Egyptians consisted of bread made from wheat. This was the staple food. They ate bread, and bread was made from wheat. They drank beer from barley. So, barley was a product which was used to make beer. They ate various fruits and vegetables, and also meat consumption was a part of their diet. Dairy products were also consumed. So, these were the main characteristics of their diet in the Egyptian civilization. Now we will go through what kind of ornaments or dresses the people of Egypt used to wear. How did they decorate themselves? Egyptians wore little clothing due to hot climate. So this area is in the middle of the desert. No matter how much fertility Nile River gives, ultimately it is in the middle of the desert, so the climate is very hot, and in hot climate they wore very little clothing. The clothes were made of linen, clothing, main or lion cloths. So the main object of making clothes was a thing called linen, and men's clothing were based on loin cloths. Loin cloths means clothes which are mainly worn on the lower portion of the body. Women wore long, tight fitting dresses with shoulder straps. So, women wore long dresses and their dress had shoulder straps. Both men and women loved ornaments. So, ornaments were loved by both men and women. They used cosmetics widely, so they used to enhance their looks with the help of cosmetics. Necklaces, earrings, bangles, and rings were also popular. So, necklaces are the ornaments worn around the neck, earrings, bangles are around arms, and rings are around fingers. So all these things were very much popular among the Egyptians. How were the houses of the Egyptians? Building materials. Houses were made up of mud bricks dried in the sun. So they had sun baked bricks. Bricks were smaller in size, however, most of their houses were made using mud blocks, which were much bigger than the bricks. The houses had airy rooms, means they had arid condition and air could flow freely inside the rooms. Tiny windows were set on the walls. So walls had very small windows, and these windows were kept in the upper portion of the house so that sunlight entered during the day, but also it does not get much heated. How were the occupations of the Egyptians? What kind of occupationary practices were done? So agriculture was the main occupation. Just like any other ancient civilization, Egypt people also followed agriculture as their main occupation because food is the main thing. Fertile land was there for agriculture, and they knew how to irrigate the land properly from river Nile. Thus, this could support their main occupation. They used a wooden hoe for plowing. Hoe is the instrument used for digging the soil. So, wooden hoe was used for plowing the soil before sowing seeds. Crops included wheat, barley, onions, peas, cotton, fruits, and vegetables. So all these crops were cultivated, and as you can see, there was a variety of crops. They did not depend on one or two crops only for their survival. Fishing, poultry, carpentry, masonry work, and weaving were very much common. So only eating food cannot make a civilization. They used to practice other occupations like carpentry, masonry, and weaving also, along with fishing and poultry. Poultry means dealing with meat products or chicken or duck. They domesticated cows, sheep, goats, camels, donkeys, and pigs. So both for dairy product and for transport items, cows were domesticated. Sheep, goats were domesticated for the purpose of meat. Camels, donkeys, and pigs were also domesticated for mainly for transport. How was the art and craft of the Egyptians? Art and craft was a very much flourishing industry because the Egyptian civilization by nature was very beautiful. Carpenters were there, goldsmiths means people who works with golds, weavers, sculptors, and potters were very much skilled in their works. So we had a set of skilled craftsmen in the Egyptian civilization. Fine cotton yarn and flax yarn textiles were manufactured. Yarn means pieces of cloth. So these clothes made out of cotton and flax were manufactured. Later on, they were modified or stitched to make different clothing items. Sculptors carved large stone statues of kings and gods. So they carved large statues mainly of their pharaohs and gods. Artisans built magnificent temples with pillared halls. So the artisans built big temples, and the characteristic features of temples in Egyptian civilization was that they had pillared halls. Wall paintings was also very much common. Tombs and temples had realistic and beautiful paintings. Craftsmanship. Paintings showed social life and used glassware. So they knew how to make glasses also using the silicon available in the desert. Earthenware means pottery works was also very much advanced. And as we know that there were a lot of carpenters, so woodwork was also a major art product in the Egyptian civilization. Now we will go through the architecture. Egyptians could construct massive buildings or could undertake massive architectural projects. Egyptians built remarkable structures like the pyramid and the Sphinx. So, pyramids and Sphinx are like the identifying features of the Egyptian civilization. Huge blocks of stone were piled in triangular shape. So, pyramids had four sides, and huge blocks of stones were piled together to make those pyramids, and they were geographically and geometrically very much precise. You can see in the image, this is a AI constructed image. You can see the nature of how the pyramids and Sphinx had looked. Engineering skill, the building showed engineering skill, so they were experts in architecture. The Sphinx had a lion's body and a human head. Now, there is a lot of debate regarding whether it was really a human head or there was a lion head before and later on it has been destroyed. So, a human head was carved out of the destroyed lion head. There is a huge debate, but Sphinx, no matter what, shows the engineering skill of the Egyptians. Stone carving, everything was made out of stone, and all the blocks of stone were curved to their very precise shape and size. Temples like Karnak show Egyptian craftsmanship. So, Karnak temple is another famous example to understand the engineering skill of the Egyptians along with their creativity in art and craft. Religion. How was the religion of the Egyptians? Belief system. Egyptians worshipped animals and forces of nature. So, belief system normally comes from anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism means respecting the entities of nature as gods. So, Egyptians worshipped animals and different forces of nature. Ra was the sun god, Osiris was the god of the dead. These were the chief gods of the Egyptian civilization. There were many other gods like Anubis, and also they respected and worshipped animals like jackal, bull, and crocodile. So these were the animals who were worshipped by the Egyptians because of many reasons. Pharaohs as gods. So the pharaohs were respected and worshipped as gods. They considered their king to be God on earth. So they were worshipped with great reverence. Each god had a temple and a priest. So every god, there were temples dedicated to every specific gods, and they were worshipped by priests who specialized in how to worship those gods. They believed in life after death. So belief in afterlife was a very much interesting phenomenon in the Egyptian civilization. So they believed that after a person dies, they go somewhere else. Hence, they will need many things in their afterlife. So along with their burial, many grave goods were also given. They embalmed the bodies with chemicals. So they covered the bodies with chemicals, and it was a very advanced biological process. And this process is called mummification. Grave goods. Mummies were buried with food, wine, jewelry, furniture, and weapons. So, all these bodies were buried with all the things which a person needs in life. Hence, they had food, they had wine, jewelry, furniture, and also weapons. So, their belief in afterlife was very much concrete, and they by no way they believed in some kind of practical sense. They believed totally that a person after dying goes somewhere else where they will need all these things. Medicines. How did they treat their sick? So, skilled doctors were there in the Egyptian civilization. Egyptian doctors and surgeons were renowned for their skills. They had deep knowledge of the human body and its systems. That can be understood from the way they prepared the bodies for making mummies. Doctors were specialized in treating eyes, teeth, etc. So they knew preliminary surgeries and had advanced knowledge of anatomy in human body. Now we will go through the economic characteristic of the Egyptian civilization, that is trade and commerce. So there were two types of trade. One is inland and the other is foreign trade. Inland trade means trade within the civilization, and foreign trade means trade with other civilizations. Trade was controlled by the pharaohs. So pharaohs were the ultimate authority in Egypt, and hence they controlled the trade also. They used barter system. There was no money in the Egyptian civilization. So things in exchange of things, that is called barter system. Mediums of exchange, grain, silver and copper were used. Sometimes grain was used for exchange. Silver and copper were also items of trade. They exported lime, wheat, ornaments, furniture, and gold. So their exports means the things which they gave out to other civilizations were mainly lime, wheat, ornaments, furniture, and also gold. What did they import? They imported gold, ivory, copper, and cedar wood. So these were the things which were not available properly in the Egyptian civilization, hence they had to import it from elsewhere. Now we will go through a few question and answers. It will not only be important in your exams, but it will help you to understand this chapter better. You can write it as answers in your exams also. Why is Egypt known as the gift of Nile? The Greek historian Herodotus has rightly called Egypt the gift of Nile. The river played an important role in the growth and development of the Egyptian civilization. It transformed the entire valley into a fertile land, making it possible to carry out farming and settle along its banks. How did the desert in Egypt help in the development of the Egyptian civilization? The desert was an added advantage, and it served as a natural barrier and protected Egypt from foreign invasions. In addition, the deserts were rich in mineral deposits, including metals. The Egyptians used these metals to make simple tools. Who was Menes? The Egyptian civilization began around 3100 BC with the unification of upper and lower regions of Egypt under the first king Menes or Narmer. In ancient Egypt, the king was called the pharaoh. Name the periods of Egyptian history. The history of Egypt can be broadly divided into the following periods: the early dynastic period 3100 BC to 2686 BC, the Old Kingdom 2686 BC to 2181 BC, the Middle Kingdom 2050 BC to 1650 BC, the New Kingdom 1550 BC to 1069 BC. Briefly describe the family life in Egyptian civilization. The ancient Egyptians placed a great deal of emphasis on family life and children. The members lived in a big joint family. The eldest male was the head of the family. Women were respected and treated equally. Education in school was imparted to boys, while girls were to take care of the home. What do you know about art and craft? that flourished in ancient Egypt. Art and craft flourished in Egypt. There were skilled craftspeople like carpenters, goldsmiths, weavers, sculptors, potters, and others. The sculptors carved large stone statues. The artisans built temples with pillared halls and decorated them with realistic and beautiful paintings. What is Sphinx? Sphinx is a mythological figure with the body of a lion and the head of a man. It is carved out of a single block of stone. The temples, such as the one at Karnak, also show Egyptian craftsmanship. Write a note on the religious beliefs of the Egyptians. Egyptians worshipped various animals and forces of nature. Their chief gods were Ra, the sun god, and Osiris, the god of the dead. They believed in life after death. Therefore, they preserved the body of the dead by embalming it with some chemicals. How do we know that the Egyptians believed in life after death? The Egyptians believed in life after death. These preserved bodies are known as mummies. Because of this belief, the mummies were buried along with food, wine, furniture, jewelry, and weapons in the pyramids. So that was all about the characteristic features of the Egyptian civilization. Hope you have enjoyed the video. In our next video, we are going to discuss about the contributions of Egypt, its legacy, and how did the Egyptian civilization decline. So stay tuned for those upcoming videos and support me so that I can bring brighter contents in future. Thank you so much for your love and support.